could Sukuna theoretically use someone else's domain expansion? We're going to talk about that and several other questions straight from you guys. But before we do, I got to give a manga spoiler warning. For my anime onlys out there, you're going to want to skip this one. Real quick, before we dive into the JJK stuff, I wanted to give a shout out to Tobias, who sent some support for me to explain this fight from Hunter x Hunter. But as it stands right now, I don't think I would do this fight the justice it deserves. So I'm going to go ahead and refund you. But man, I really appreciate the support. And this is something I would like to cover in the future. So first up, we've got this question from Lazuli. And Lazuli, first of all, thank you for all of the support recently, man. But Lazuli wants to know if I think that Sukuna in Megumi's body would be able to use Chimera Shadow Garden. And this is tough, but I'm leaning towards no, he wouldn't be able to. And it's basically just because we know domain expansions are the manifestation of one's innate domain into reality, which it's not an innate domain isn't necessarily equal to a soul, but that's kind of a way to think about it, right? So I don't think Sukuna would be able to manifest Megumi's innate domain in order to create that domain expansion. Clearly he can use the curse technique, but as we know, that's kind of engraved in your brain or in your body, slightly different than the innate domain itself. And what we also do know now that Akotsu can clearly use someone else's domain, but it's not in the same way that Sukuna would have to. And let me clarify. That's because Akotsu's technique is copy. So I think his domain is uniquely positioned to be able to utilize other people's curse techniques inside of the barrier. Which maybe Sukuna can do too, since we don't know like the truth of his curse technique yet. If Sukuna's curse technique is somehow storage or copy, not exactly the same as Akotsu's, but in that same vein, then I would change my answer, and it's possible that he too could imbue one of his copied or borrowed or stored curse techniques into the barrier of his domain as well. But even if that were the case, it wouldn't be Chimera Shadow Garden, in my opinion. It would just be 10 shadows imbued into Sukuna's barrier, if that makes sense. In the same way that Akotsu's domain is still true love or whatever and has all of the swords, but he's just using Angel's curse technique. You know, Sukuna's domain might still be Malevolent Shrine, but just 10 shadows is imbued instead of Cleave and Dismantle. This answer got way longer than I expected, but I hope that makes sense. Now, for your second question on if Akotsu would be able to summon Maharaga if he copied 10 shadows, I don't see why not, honestly. Obviously, if that were to happen, there would be some pretty interesting questions, like how long would it last? Would it disappear after the 5 minutes? If he managed to tame it within the 5 minutes, could he then summon Maharaga anytime he copied 10 shadows after that point? Like, who knows what the answers to those questions would be? And honestly, I don't think we'll see that in the story. But I do think that, you know, given the rules of what we know for Akotsu's technique, there's no reason he wouldn't theoretically be able to do this. Next up, we got a question from Me Love Dinos, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Please don't ever apologize for the amount of a donation. I'm truly humbled by any and all support that you guys show me. It just blows me away that y'all enjoy this content enough to show some love for what I'm doing here. So I thank you, and please, again, erase that from your mind. But Dinos wants to know, essentially, if Akotsu was the one that ate the finger and they managed to kill Sukuna, could Sukuna then incarnate in Akotsu since he ate the finger? I will say that I don't think that's what happened. I would reckon that Rika is probably the one that ate the finger. But if it was Akotsu and things played out that way, I guess it would be theoretically possible, right? Next up, we've got a few questions from Zold here. Thank you so much for the support, man. And y'all feel free to pause if you want to fully read what Zold said. But to answer your first question about the heavenly restricted users and the kind of esoteric effects of cursed energy, I would say yes. I think they are more resistant to that stuff in general. Now, does it mean they're immune? No, but I think they definitely just are more durable in the same way that they're more durable and stronger and faster in all of the other like normal attributes, you could say. But I definitely think that extends to cursed energy as well. And Yuki even alludes to this a bit in her conversation with Geto during Hidden Inventory. So I think, yes, I think, you know, Toji, Maki are going to be more resistant to like a cursed energy attack than, say, a normal human being. And your second question is, what would happen if a curse that was already special grade ate one of Sukuna's Sukuna's fingers? Would they become a super finger bearer, or would they be a valid vessel for Sukuna? So you asked this question before chapter 251 came out, but now we kind of have an answer to this because Rika at least presumably ate Sukuna's finger, and she clearly didn't become a finger bearer curse, right? But this is just, it's hard to say because one, we don't know like with 100% certainty that she ate the entire finger. Like maybe she ate a little nibble because that's all it takes. Maybe she just needs a little DNA for a Akotsu to copy. But I would say that she probably did eat the entire thing and she didn't become a finger bearer, right? So is that because she is just like too powerful to be influenced by a single finger? Maybe. But we also don't know like what Rika truly is anymore. Like, is she still fully a curse? Like, is it fair to call her that? Ever since what happened at the end of Jujutsu Kaisen 0, I know some people call her more akin to a Shikigami, and I understand why they say that, but I'm not fully comfortable calling this Rika a Shikigami. I think she's just somewhere kind of in limbo, like as to what she exactly is. But to answer your question about would they be a valid vessel for Sukuna, no. And we know this because in an answer from the fan book, Gege talks a little bit about this, about like what awareness Sukuna has of curses that eat his fingers, and it's not the same as when a human eats his finger. Like when Yuji ate the finger, Sukuna has like a full awareness of what's happening around Yuji, has access to Yuji's memories. It's not the same when a curse eats the finger. Why is that the case? I don't know, but that's what Gege decided. And then for your final question on what would happen if Tengen had absorbed Yuki, would she have gained her curse technique or her fighting capabilities, or would they have just merged, right? And that's a great question. Unfortunately, there's nothing in the manga we can really point to try to lean one way or the other on this. But I would say since we never saw Tengen do anything besides, the barrier techniques and her immortality technique, it would imply that Tengen maybe doesn't get access to the techniques of the people she fuses with, but it's also possible that the previous star plasma vessels didn't have curse techniques, right? So it's really hard to say. But since we never saw any inkling or hints of that, I would assume that Yuki would just get absorbed and Tengen would not have access to the curse technique. But, your guess is as good as mine. All right, y'all. Next up, we actually got some hilarious donations as a follow-up to my Akotsu versus Kashimo video. And this is from the same person that requested that video initially, basically saying, like, who is actually stronger, who would win without Rika or a domain expansion, and who would win without domain expansions, curse techniques, cursed energy, and broken legs. And the person changed their name to Kashimo Low Diffs Yuta. So this was hilarious. I literally laughed out loud at this. But Kashimo, for all three of these, he just is stronger in general in base form, I would say. So he would win under all of these conditions. Also, thank you so much for the support and the laugh. Next up, we've got a question from Bleached Moon, who wants to know if Sukuna could still use Enchain. And no, he couldn't, because the way that binding vow was constructed was for a one-time use. Sukuna says Enchain, and then he gets 60 seconds of access to Yuji's body, right? So if Sukuna were to somehow end up back in Yuji's body now, he wouldn't be able to do this again. And finally today, y'all, we've got this question from Brandon. I'll move out of the way and y'all can pause if you want to read the whole thing. But Brandon is essentially asking a couple of things. One, what do I think the thematic purpose of the barrierless domains are? And that's actually really interesting. It's actually an angle I've never really thought about before now. But I would think that it just shows such a high level of skill. And I know that sounds very obvious, but when we first knew that only Sukuna could do it, it just felt like the pinnacle of Jujutsu, right? But then we come to find out that Kenjaku can also do it. And Kenjaku is obviously no slouch, but he's not on the levels of a Sukuna or a Gojo, right? And I honestly expected during the Gojo Sukuna fight that Gojo might whip out a barrierless domain, but he never did. He still could, that still might happen. But the fact that he didn't during that fight also kind of told me a lot about it. We've been told that Gojo can do anything after he tries it one time. So it really surprised me that he never tried to whip that out during the fight. So to me, that says the barrierless domain is not only just raw power, skill, talent, it's knowledge. And so to me, that's what it represents. Both Sukuna and Kenjaku, these ancient sorcerers, kind of just have one up on everyone else from their vast troves of experience, if you will. So that's kind of what I've taken from it in the story thus far. But again, I know a lot of people don't think Gojo's coming back. I'm going to make another video on that, follow-up video on that pretty soon. But we still might see Gojo do this as well. And y'all, that's going to do it for this one. Big hearts to everyone who made this video possible. I will see you guys in the next one.